Are you ready to get started?
Yes.
All right, so my first question for you is you've been described as a cultural icon. What does doing it for the culture mean for you?
Um, I would say that I don't know. I think organically I'm tapped into a lot of elements of the culture. If it's like hip hop, if it's streetwear, if it's sneaker world. So I think that naturally I'm sort of like in those worlds, and I think for me it's operating in an authentic way into those worlds. Because even though they're sort of like on a mainstream level in today, I think that it's also important to sort of to still have the respect and the integrity of the culture. So I think that that's important.
And for someone who's watching this and might be interested in getting into streetwear, how do you bring that authenticity into the industry?
Um, I think that for me, authenticity just means that you are speaking from an honest perspective. There are so many brands out there that are doing exceptionally well. I mean, from Supreme to like Kith, and those brands speak to their audience from their honest perspective. And I think that that's awesome. But there's also so many different ways you can do that. You can be you can come from the suburbs and still be in streetwear. You can come from another country, like you can do it in your own way and do it in an authentic way. And I think that that's a win-win situation, I think.
Absolutely. And with your career as a sneaker designer, but also as a music video director, how did you get your start?
So for me, I think it's hard to say, but I moved to New York City. I went to film school, and being in film school was definitely a way for me to meet a lot of other artists. And then also I worked in retail. I worked at the Stussy store, which is owned by James Jebbia, who owns Supreme. So it was sort of like I was in those worlds, like having just come, moving to New York, and kind of got immersed in the community of artists and creatives. And for my directing, having gone to film school, I really focused on creating a reel so that when I finished school I was able to get hired out of school. That was very helpful. And also for me, for fashion, I was like constantly drawing and sketching clothes and sneakers, and so that kind of really also helped me. So I feel like as much as the success is like, visible, I think that what's hasn't been so visible is like being in those worlds, organically. And I think a lot of young people do that, they're just sort of like making things without thinking about it. And I think that that sort of helped me to get to where I am.
And with your career path and your journey, what has been the greatest lesson you've learned as an entrepreneur?
Um, I think it is that success is a journey, not a destination. If I think of brands that I love or artists that I love, a lot of projects that they did early in their career didn't work, but it didn't stop them. It was sort of like a learning curve, like figuring out what works for you and doing it at the right time. I think that that's been a major learning lesson.
Absolutely. And now getting into your partnership with PineSol, can you tell us a little bit about this partnership and how it began?
Yes. So PineSol approached me about designing a sneaker with them. And they told me that 100% of the profits would support Digital Undivided, which is a non for profit which supports Black female entrepreneurs. And, it was an opportunity that was very exciting for me because I was able to be creative and also support my community. So that's how it came about.
What's it like being able to use, your talent as a designer and also help your community at the same time?
It's been a game changer, I'll say. I think now it's really it's an opportunity that has opened up my eyes in ways that I wasn't really, I guess, able to see, that like I could make something and support my community. And so now I'm looking at ways of like how I continue that opportunity and kind of make it a part of like my DNA and like my creative path. Like how do I continue to make projects and items that support my community? So that's been really, really exciting for me.
And with your creative path, what was the inspiration for the shoe that you designed?
So for me, I think I feel like I keep saying that, sorry. When I think back to my memories of PineSol as a kid because, for me, when I'm making something, I always want to look back into how I was first introduced to the brand or what connected me to the brand. So it's basically like my childhood. And, having grown up with, a West Indian family where we all cleaned on Saturdays as a whole. And, knowing that like at that time in my life, I was super involved in skate culture and obsessed with like skate sneakers. And so for me, I wanted to make a shoe that represented that era of my life, which also worked hand in hand because like, the 90s is still trending. It's still like a very cool moment happening in fashion. So it was an era of my life that I wanted to sort of like tap into.
And pulling from kind of bringing together the inspiration of growing up in a West Indian household and PineSol, and then also with working with a charity, what is something you would tell young Black girls who are watching this about entrepreneurship that they might not know now, especially with seeing how it's evolved in the past 5 years?
Um, I would say that just because you don't see it in the marketplace or you don't see it happening doesn't mean that you can't create it. For me, growing up, I didn't necessarily see an example of what I am doing in my life. And, when a young Black woman or young person of color, says to me like, oh, I didn't know that that was possible. And I was like, I want to say I didn't know that was possible. But, if you have it in your heart and you have it in your mind, you can create it. Anything is possible. I was a kid who couldn't afford name brand sneakers and ended up being the first woman to design a pair of Jordans. So I think that you can create any model of yourself. You can create any brand that you want. Like anything is possible. I think that you don't have to fit into the terms of what you already see, or if you think that lane is already taken, you can create your own lane.
And with the rise of social media, what is the significance of visibility in today's era?
Um, it's definitely major. I think, for me, and I think for most Black and people of color, like you kind of assume, oh, I don't see myself there, so I'm not supposed to be in those places or spaces. It's a weird sort of quiet pain that we sort of all kind of held. I feel like you just assume, okay, it's not even worth talking about because it's not going to change and it's not going to evolve. And I think that in the recent specifically the past 2 years, it's like been a huge awakening that we can see like, no, we can use our voices, we can say we're here, we can show how we want to be represented. And when we're not represented in a way that's authentic or true or honest, we can speak up on it and people can hear us. So I think that that's important. And I think that that's also exciting more than anything, to look back on the trauma and the trouble and the pain of it all, and to know now like, okay, you know what, we can be in control of this, and to recognize that we were in control of it the whole time, but now we can really like enforce like our our energy in the right way. Yeah.